Baylor Bears fans, we're back. We're back as your Bears open up conference play, open up a big time conference opponent. You know, I got somebody here that has some intimate knowledge of the folks out there in Tempe, some people that can give us some insight, some injury insight that he just broke, but just some general insight into a game that concludes the what I call the 4 game stretch of Baylor season that could determine the season. We had some teams that have underachieved in the Big 12 so far. I'm looking at you, Kansas State. But just in general, Baylor's first 4 games, you had two. Well, this was a ranked matchup, but you had a ranked matchup in SMU. You had two ranked matchups. Actually, Auburn is now ranked. SMU was ranked at the time. So you have 3 high-level opponents, and a lot of the success of the season outcome, season goals were going to be based around that 4 game stretch. So we've come to the end of that 4 game stretch, and to help me learn a little bit more about the Sun Devils, I got Kevin Hicks, lead beat reporter for Arizona State on that side. Kevin, how you doing, man?
Doing good, man. Just thank you for having me on the show. Just got out of practice a couple hours ago and got some interesting information from Coach Dillingham about the matchup that could really throw a wrench into it, a wrinkle into it, however you want to put it.
Okay, and I was about to say, like your boots on ground out there in Phoenix. We talked a little bit about um my love for Phoenix, honestly, how much I like it out there, the general vibes. Um Born and raised in Phoenix. We'll get a little bit into you before we hop into some of the stuff you learned today. Born and raised in Phoenix. How long have you been covering this team? And as a hometown guy, is it just a little bit more oomph in terms of the coverage of the team?
Yeah, so I really started watching football around the time I was 7 or 8 years old, heavily, and I grew up a fan of the Arizona State athletic program as a whole. Uh, Grew up watching James Harden, some really, really great players, some Jalen Strong, Jaden Daniels, Brandon Ayuk. There are some really, really great Sun Devils, and that really boosted my passion for the program. Now I'm in a different role as media, but having that background with the program, that intimate knowledge, I feel like kind of gives me a different perspective. Like not using that to like as a bragging point or anything at all. I just think that following them for so long has kind of gifted me an advantage a little bit. And I've been covering ASU since May. Beforehand, I was covering the Suns and Cardinals for SI and got the big break over the off season. And it was a little challenging to get some content out during the off season, during the dead period. But once football started, we've been running strong, and I'm looking forward to the game in Waco on Saturday for sure.
So you've got, like I said, just you got Jalen Strong. That's a name. I always thought he had one of the stranger draft stories that I saw. He was a guy that was a projected first round pick for much of that draft. I can't remember what draft he was in. I think he either dropped into the third or fourth round.
Yeah, he
But
was
he
third.
was he was a guy that was so physically dominant at the point of a catch, that on jump balls, catch points in college, and you kind of see it now to where that type of receiver is almost dying out in a sense. You think about the top receivers in the game right now, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill. Those guys are more speedster separation guys. But for my money, the receivers that we grew up on, like a Calvin Johnson, a Julio Jones, they resemble more so a Jalen Strong
Very.
archetype. So it's like I said, that was a good blast to the past. I actually have a little bit of history with the head man Kenny Dillingham over there. I told you I was from Memphis before I got here. I think Kenny was on the Memphis coaching staff my junior and senior year. I ended up being I had some low FBS, some high FCS offers. I ended up going to Purdue A&M right outside of Houston. So that was actually Kenny Dillingham and Dan Lanning that quote unquote recruited me at Memphis. So that Memphis coaching staff, Silverfield's still here. We know where Norvell's at. We know where Lanning and Kenny are. You looking back at that era. Memphis football had been bad for a long time, so that group kind of really resurrected it. But it's kind of crazy to see where all the different assistants on that program have gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And The ASU staff just a couple years before Norvell left to take that Memphis job was pretty crazy too. I believe Dan Lanning and Dilly were on that staff as well. And
Mm.
you also had Billy Napier. You had some guys that have turned into pretty impressive head coaches overall. I remember those Memphis teams too. Brady White, Mike Norvell. Those were fun teams to watch. That's a blast in the past.
No, for sure. And one thing, because like I said, especially with your like your intimate knowledge of the team, talk to me a little bit about the culture around ASU, specifically with football. Before I think you heard to call him Billy. Before my boy Kennedy got there, because it wasn't not a prominent national power, not a blue blood, but get your playoff spot last year. You got undeniable talent, at least at the top with Tyson and Sam Levitt, and then some of the guys I mentioned in my question to you, some of the D line guys. So just how has Coach Dillingham really been able to kind of flip the script in terms of resources, national perception, and just the general aesthetics of the program since he got there?
So I kind of always take the angle of Dillingham, like Dillingham loves using the phrase activate the valley. He really believes in the fan base showing up each and every week, showing up by donating to the NIL fund, the Sun Angel Collective. He finds him and Graham Rossini, the athletic director, find creative ways to improve the NIL sphere to make the fan experience better at Sun Devil Stadium. Really, the what I go back to is that Arizona State has kind of been labeled as a sleeping giant, quote unquote, for the last 30 years. Ever since they made that Rose Bowl, they were a few seconds away from maybe even winning a national title. Everybody looks at that program and they're like, they have the location, they have the resources, they have pretty much everything you need to be a powerhouse program. You just keep hiring the wrong coaches and have the wrong leadership in place. But now that Herm Edwards and Ray Anderson are outside the door, you bring in two younger guys in Rossini, the AD, like I said, and Dillingham. They know how to navigate the modern landscape of college football. They're very tapped in. Rossini was a Diamondbacks employee. I believe he was like in the analytics department and scouting department before he came to Arizona State because he was a graduate from Arizona State in 2002, I believe. So he has the background knowledge of the Valley and the program as well. But he's very in tune with boosting fan morale, boosting the fan experience at games, uh, setting up like VIP treatment for recruits. Like the recruits, like all you hear about is recruits talking about how they feel like they're a priority to the program. And that wasn't something that was the case under Herm Edwards. It was kind of just like the recruits were a number, as I hate to say that, but that's kind of like what it was, especially when you read about the recruiting scandal and everything that went down. So I really think that they are making what worked before even better. And I think that what wasn't working, they've adjusted and they've turned the tables around to make it work. Uh, the program is a well-oiled machine, I think, right now. Players are staying at a high rate. Coaches are staying at a high rate. They retain basically every single position coach and coordinator from last season to this season. And I think everybody is very happy with where they're at. I think that players are recognizing that Arizona State is now a legitimate program that can develop NFL talent at a high rate. Obviously, we had the Brandon Ayuk's and the uh, Jalen Strongs and such before, but now I feel like a year-to-year basis, you're probably going to have multiple Sun Devils getting drafted come each April. And that's really the main point that I had to make as to the morale and the general direction of the program.
Hmm. And you see, you got another one down the pipeline in Jordan Tyson. I think he would be my pick for the Biletnikoff winner right now because Jeremiah Smith has not really he's underperformed a little bit so far. As a guy that, like I said, I run a podcast with a guy that's he's on his second year of professional football in Europe. Jordan Tyson. He's a rare guy that is a technician in terms of his route running, his understanding of finding space, but he's not capped athletically. Like I think I saw one play last year. Took a slam 80 yards to the house, and he caught it in zone coverage, I think. So he outran guys 2-3 angles, honestly. So that's like I said, that'll just, as you know, it'll just continue to further the the legitimacy of the program. Um, and beyond that, like I said, if you ever been to ASU, I was so mad I didn't get to go during the school year. But premium student environment, I'll put it like that. Premium student environment, definitely so. Yeah, I gotta get back out there. I gotta get back there sooner than later. But like we started off, Kevin, you just left practice. Probably, maybe the last padded practice before they get loaded up to head down to Texas. You got some pretty interesting news on the skill position on both sides of the ball. One side in particular taking multiple injuries, considering that the high start that Sawyer Roberts has been in, that's gotten off to. So tell me a little bit about some of the injury news that you learned today at practice and how you would think it affects ASU's matchup versus Baylor.
So after practice, Coach Dillingham ruled out Xavier Alford for the game. He's been the described leader of the defense by multiple coaches. He had a very, very strong season last year. I believe he ended up being first team All Big 12. It could be second. I'd have to go back and look, but he's kind of had an interesting career. He started out at Texas as a Texas native. He transferred to USC, played 2 seasons at USC, and then transferred to Arizona State in 2023. He sat out that season due to redshirt rules. The redshirt rules hadn't changed to that point, so he had to sit out that year. And he came in and played last year. He was phenomenal. He's really one of those jack of all trades players that every coach loves to have. He can sit back in coverage in center field. He can create chaos, create turnovers. Uh, he's the thing about Arizona State's secondary is that they are all pretty strong at supporting the uh, run stopping. He's just a very good leader, very good all around player, and him being out is kind of impactful to them. I mean, I don't think there's any way around that. But they do feel very, very good about the guy that's starting in his place, Adrian Boogie Wilson. He was a starter last season at Washington State. Then he transferred to ASU in January, I believe. He's kind of a great compliment to Ghost Rouser, who's the free safety. He is really physical. He's a bone crushing tackler. He can sit back in coverage too and play center field. Uh, he's he obviously isn't as experienced as Alfred and probably isn't as talented at this stage, but he's somebody that can be plugged and played into Brian Ward's system, the defensive coordinator. And as for the other player, Montana Warren, he has been the starting nickelback the first 3 games of the season. Uh, he was in a battle with Purdue transfer Kendrick Breedlove for the starting nickel spot, replacing Shamari Simmons. And I'm sure Baylor fans have heard of Shamari Simmons. He was a massive, massive part of the defense last season. So that was one of the big questions going into the season, is along with the loss of Cam Skattebo. But Montana Warren has done a phenomenal job. He was one of my standout players during fall camp that I witnessed personally. Uh, he didn't suit up for practice today, I believe. I believe he was dressed, but he didn't participate really. And Dillingham said that he's questionable at best for this game, so that doesn't sound too good prognosis wise. But I do believe Kendrick Breedlove is ready to step in. He was at Purdue before, and obviously he wasn't able to show what he had too much because Purdue was just an interesting situation last year. I think that when you surround him with a little more talent, that he's able to show his skill set in a more impactful way. He even did that last week. He broke up 2 passes in key situations. I believe one was a third down situation and one was a red zone play. I'd have to go back and watch to confirm that, but he is a pretty quality player. That's one of the strengths of the ASU team this year, I believe, is that the overall depth is a lot better
Mm.
this year compared to last year or any previous year for ASU football, really back to 2021. Uh, you're probably going to have to do a little bit of shuffling. Like, there's going to be some players that haven't seen the field too much that will, like Jack Ball. He's probably going to play some safety. I'm not sure what they'll do at nickel behind Breedlove, but I'm sure they'll figure it out. They have a great point of attack in place. they're very coordinated, the coaching staff. I think that they'll figure things out on the fly. And on the offensive side of the ball, it sounds like Kyson Brown is going to be back, the de facto starting running back for the team. It's not 100% confirmed, but he was taking part in practice, and Dillingham said on Monday in his press conference that he expects him to be back. But on the flip side, he said he expected Jalen Moss to be back as well, and he is going to be out. He's the starting slot receiver on the team. He exited the first game of the season against NAU with an injury. He missed the Mississippi State game. He missed the Texas State game. So he basically missed 2.5 games already. And he was set to come back, but he has an illness, and it sounds like he has to stay away from the team. Uh, he's not making the trip to Waco, and that's going to be very, very impactful. That might be the most impactful of all three, because as we've seen, the receiving core received a lot of hype around Sam Levitt going into the season, and really it's been the Jordan Tyson show the whole season to this point. Uh, Me personally, I was a big, big fan of Jaron Hamilton, the Alabama transfer heading into the season, but uh, he has yet to haul in a catch this season. He had two potential really big plays that didn't come to fruition. He had a touchdown catch that just fell off the tip of his fingers, and he returned the kickoff for a touchdown that got called back due to holding. But I think his moment's coming, but he's more of an outside guy than a slot guy. Uh, Maybe Derek Eusebio steps in and plays the Jalen Moss role, but he's not nearly as big or physical, and he's not experienced either. So it's going to be a challenge to see who steps up in his absence again.
Hmm. Okay. I mean, you talk about the level of depth. It's apparent you get two secondary starters going down, and you get to replace them with two plug and play power forward transfers. So that's always good. And one thing I talked to you about that the Jalen Moss interview, you talk about it as probably the most impactful. And one question even coming in to the season, you lose Xavier Guillory, you lose Cam Scatterboo. Was those auxiliary offensive weapons around Jordan Tyson? Because I told you, Sam Levitt, a guy that's probably one of the best watches for me in college football, but he definitely, I mean, he was a freshman last year. So he definitely can be a little bit erratic in terms of, and we saw it in the Mississippi State game in terms of his accuracy, but also his decision making. So with that, like, what is the balance for Kenny Dillingham, especially as a guy, offensive guy? What is that balance for him in terms of prioritizing Jordan Tyson, but making sure that the game plan doesn't get too predictable?
Um, that's a great question. I think that Kenny Dillingham teams have typically always been built around the run before anything else. Like even when he was the OC at Oregon with Bo Nix that one year in 2022, they were they self-described themselves as a run-first team. We start by dictating the flow of the game through the trenches, through the run game, and then we let Bo do his thing uh, as we go through the game script, as we progress into the game outside the constraints of the game script. I kind of feel like it's the same this season. Obviously, top 20 in the nation right now in rushing yards per game. You have three running backs that can all realistically give you 100 each and every week. They're not going to, but they can, and that's a great problem to have. All three of them can catch passes out of the backfield. All three of them can run routes downfield. All three of them are blockers. Uh, that's something really, really great about this offense. And I think that that's probably going to be the point of attack to start the game because obviously Baylor's rush defense is probably the weakest spot of the team if you want to boil it down to one point of contention. Uh, and the it's really kind of it's not all that linear when it comes to describing what the balance is because Marcus Arroyo, the offensive coordinator, is very, very good. Like he's renowned for being able to adapt on the fly compared to a lot of other coaches. Like he's phenomenal at it. But he was kind of talking about that practice a couple weeks ago. He was like, if we had 20 targets and gave 14 of them to somebody other than Tyson, it's you guys would be complaining that we aren't giving Tyson the ball enough. So he's pretty much trying to bridge the gap between force feeding Tyson and just if he's open, feed him the ball. If he's like not like blanket covered, throw him the ball.
Mm,
So it's a fine line to me. I really do believe that they need to do a better job of scheming other receivers open. That's probably one point of constructive criticism that I have. Like obviously I'm not a coach, so I'm not like the decision maker, but that's probably something that I would do. I think that you have some pretty good separators out there. Like I said, Jaron Hamilton. I think Malik McClain has potential to do a lot more than he's done. Shimon Mateer, he's very similar to Baylor's tight end Michael Trigg. Similar build, similar hands. I think Trigg is probably a little more athletic, but Mateer just had a 6 catch game last week, and that's kind of a glimpse of what the guys opposite of Tyson can do. And when those guys get going, life's going to be a lot easier for Jordan as well because you can only stretch yourselves so thin on a sideline to sideline basis. So uh, I think that it's obviously the offense is predicated around Jordan Tyson, but I don't necessarily think they look to force feed him. I think that other guys just need to step up.
mm. So there are other guys that could burn that Baylor secondary. Okay, gotcha. Because it's like you said, you talk about the run defense, the secondary, in the SMU game. Because no offense to Sanford or Texas State, I saw y'all played them, but just focus on the matchups where the talent's a little bit more equal on both sides. Noticing that like I said, Romello Brinson, the guy that came from Miami, he's not great. He's experienced, but he's definitely on the level with Jordan Tyson. He had 2 touchdowns, over 120 receiving yards, killed that Baylor secondary. Baylor secondary just has not been good. They kind of, I don't know, I say avoided getting thrashed in the week 1 game against Auburn just because Auburn ran the ball so well. But that was something that was a major factor, a major worry going to the year with Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton on the outside. Um, Let me ask you this though, talking about the run game, because one thing that again was a point of emphasis, Jackie Marshall's he's slowly working back to 100% coming off the high ankle sprain in the Auburn game. Chris Johnson Jr., running back for SMU, who's again dad is CJ2K. He's probably the best athlete that Baylor has faced so far. And while I think the run defense, the primary focus, the primary issue is the D line. They just don't have the bodies up front, especially without Jackie Marshall to not get washed off the ball. But they have a lot of run and hit athletes. Keenan Thomas, first team All Big 12 last year. Travion Barnes is a guy that was a 100 tackle guy coming in from FIU. You got your 2 transfer edge rushers and Amarion Winston and Matthew Fobbs White. And even our safety room, Jacob Redding, DJ Coleman. Those are guys that can play in the box. They have some really good tacklers in the safety room, and again, a lot of run and hit athletes. So, how would you grade this Arizona State offensive line? Like you said, you had 250 yards versus Mississippi State. Raleigh Brown, Kanye Udo, I think, both had 100-yard games. So, do you think the Arizona State run game benefits more so from, like I said, kind of a road grading offensive line, or just some of the athleticism make you miss of your running backs?
I think it's a mix of both. I also think that Sean Aguano deserves a lot of credit for his track record. He's the running backs coach. For those that aren't aware, he's been the running backs coach since the 2019 season. So I think he is the longest tenured coach on the staff. Uh, 2019, that means he's coached Eno Benjamin, he's coached Rashad White, he's coached X
Mm-hmm.
Valade, he's coached Cam Scattaboo, and now he has 3 great running backs at his display right now. And I think that he does a phenomenal job of getting them ready for in-game situations, whether that's uh, focused on downhill running, pass catching, like I said earlier, whether it's in the flat or downfield, blocking even. I think that he really is a well-rounded coach, and I think that he does a great job of developing talent. I think the talent is good as well. I think Raleek Brown was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, going to USC, and he really flashed as his first year in USC. Second year didn't really work out too well. transferred to Arizona State, and he had a hamstring issue that was really, really bad last year. He only played in one game,
Mm.
so he redshirted, and that probably worked out better for him because he wouldn't have received that much run realistically. With Cam Scadaboo being the workhorse and with Kyson Brown being the backup, but the talent is obviously there. Tyson Brown had 145 total yards in the first game of the season against not Mississippi State, Northern Arizona. Uh, Obviously, it's an FCS opponent, but totaling that many all-purpose yards in a single game for against any competition is impressive to me. Uh, he might be the most explosive back on the team from frontline speed to backline speed, even with Raleek Brown on the roster. Uh, but we saw Raleek Brown's explosiveness last week against Texas State as well. He broke a run off the counter, 75 yards for a touchdown, and he's deceptively strong. He looks like he's very small, like he's shorter than I am, but he has that deceptive strength. He's almost like Cam Scadaboo at times with running the ball. Like he can take a pile a few yards downfield. He did that in the first game of the season. And then Kanye Udo is more of the traditional uh, I guess, downhill runner, if you want to say that, coming from Army. And he's done a very, very good job of adjusting to a new offensive system. Uh, I think he could factor into the Baylor game plan. We'll see what happens in terms of snap distribution and all that. But I think it's a good balance between the line and the individual talent and the coaching. The offensive line has had some struggles, but it's been more so in pass coverage than anything else. And also Ben Coleman, who was an all Big 12 member last season at left guard, he made a switch to center to replace Leaf Fatanu. And that hasn't been the most seamless transition so far. Obviously, no matter how experienced you are on the offensive line, making that switch is a major one. It's going to have some growing pains associated with it. But I've been very impressed with the interior offensive line. Himito Bigbo, particularly, he's actually a Texas State transfer, and he, I believe, he's been the highest graded offensive lineman on Arizona State's roster so far, according to PFF.
Mm.
So he's done a great job of sliding into that Ben Coleman role. I think that the the offense obviously hasn't consistently showed the high end ability that we believed it had going into the season, but the pieces are still there to be an elite offense. And I think that sooner rather than later, they will probably get it together and put a full scale offensive performance together.
Mm. So you talk about one thing you talked about was Kenny Dillaham's praise for Sawyer Robertson, a guy that he talked about how he recruited him. But also again, just almost 1,000 yards in 2 games. He's a guy that, because they've been behind, at least in the two PAL conference games, they did a lot of throwing. But just being in year two, he's just so much more comfortable. You can kind of tell that the Jake Spitball really like opened it up for him. Um, so talk to me. Well, what would you just say, Kevin? Do you think you have more? What do you think has more? How would I say it? What do you think? What do you think? Which offense do you think could be more potent? Sawyer Robertson against a Sun Devil secondary missing 2 starters, or Sam Levin and Jordan Tyson against just played out a weak Baylor secondary that's not missing anybody.
That's a great question. That I really don't know which way to go with that one, if I'm being completely honest. Because, like I said, I think the Sun Devils are gonna the run game's going to be the bread and butter this week. I think that that's really going to be the attack in the game script. I think it's going to get start dictate the game through the run early on, get Sam Levitt comfortable through play actions and RPOs. And as the game goes on, maybe you decide to air it out a little more, take a few more risks. But I think that they recognize the Baylor run game as a real point of attack to exploit. And I think they're going to do just that. I don't think they're going to sidestep around that. So I'm not sure how airing out they're going to go, how much airing out they're going to do early on. But on the flip side, I think Sawyer might have to throw the ball a lot because Bryson Washington's obviously phenomenally talented running back. He's probably the most talented running back that ASU has faced this season. But the ASU run defense has been dominant for a full year now. There's a full year of sample of them basically locking down every single rushing attack they've faced. When you look at the Mississippi State rushing attack, we all know Mississippi State beat them on the big play. They took 30 carries for 66 yards. That's 2.4 yards per carry. That's ridiculous. The rushing attack was supposed to be a point of strength for Mississippi State going into the season and in that game. CJ Fight and Jacob Richkangaika are both incredible. They're really to the point of being labeled game wreckers, in my opinion. I don't like using that word liberally, but CJ Fight is at the point where he's really getting double teamed every single rep he takes. Uh, it looks like they're going to get Zach Swanson back this week. He's a transfer from Texas, and he was a key piece, depth piece. I believe he was too deep last season. Uh, they have there's a lot to like on that defensive line, the front seven, like I said, even the secondary is pretty adept at the run support. And I think the linebacking core certainly is as well with Jordan Crook. I don't know if you saw it, but last week he recorded 3.5 tackles for loss. He was in the backfield almost every play from what I saw. He's majorly disruptive. Cyrus Viaseu is probably one of the best run stoppers at linebacker in the entire Big 12. Uh, Keyshawn Elliott is very, very active. He's all over the field. He's probably the leader of the defense going into this week with no Alford. So I believe that if Baylor's going to have to really play through the air. Uh, I think that that's the main point of it. Obviously, they're going to have to run the ball, but I think that they're going to have to find ways to scheme their receivers open in an ASU defense that is a little more prone to giving up the big play because of how aggressive Brian Ward calls the defense. But I don't have any doubt that Sawyer is going to have a good game. I think that Dillingham pretty much described him perfectly. He's very intelligent. He's very poised. He's accurate. He might not have the biggest arm in the world, but he's really the prototypical build that teams look for in a quarterback. He's able to see the middle of the field, which is huge for his attack. Uh, I think he's going to have a big game. I think Levitt's going to have a good game as well, but it might be more of an efficient game where
Mm.
you're only seeing him throw the ball about 20 to 25 times. I think Sawyer might throw the ball 30, 35 times if I have a guess at that. Uh, but it's going to be a chess match for sure. I think that both coaching staffs will be pushed to the limit. I think that both rosters will have to rotate different players in and out a lot because of how fast paced it's probably going to be. Uh, it's going to be an interesting game.
I'm interested. We'll do a little rapid fire as we wound down. One big picture thing: Sam Levitt, I believe, is eligible for the draft this year, 2025, as a redshirt sophomore.
Yep.
He's still so young. And also in the ways of NIL and college football. We saw what happened to Quinn Ewers we saw what happened to Quinn Ewers, turned down multiple $1 million to, I believe, be a practice squad or a casualty cut for the Dolphins. Um, does ASU program see Levitt as a guy that will return, next season, or may even, push out the NFL for 2 years and maybe wait until 2027?
I think the assumption is right now that he's going to go pro after the season. I think that that's kind of been his mindset for the last few months, that this would be his last season of college ball. It's really hard to say where his stock is right now at the NFL level. To me, I believe he's probably a first round talent. I don't think anything's set in stone yet. There's obviously a lot more football to be played, and obviously the Mississippi State game kind of put a damper on things for him because you saw the flaws that he has still, like his footwork, some of his decision-making moments under duress in big, uh, like true high leverage situations. There are some things that he still has to work on. But when you look at the 2026 quarterback class, nobody has really done a whole lot to differentiate themselves from one another. I think that it's wide open right now to who's QB1 to who's a first round quarterback. Really, if you ask me, I think really only Fernando Mendoza has been the prospect that has really stood out consistently. Like you look at K Klubnik, he struggled. Garrett Nussmeier struggled a little bit.
Sellers has struggled.
Uh,
Yeah, Lagway.
Sellers has struggled. Sellers has the physical profile, but he hasn't really backed it up in game yet. Uh, but when you look at Levitt, he has a 10, 12 game sample of being a really, really good college quarterback. And he has a lot of traits that you look for in a franchise quarterback. He's 6'2", so he's sufficient size. I mean, obviously NFL teams look more for 6'4", 6'5" typically, but he's sufficient size. He has a big arm. He's very, very athletic. That's one probably the most underrated part of his game. And I think people are starting to catch on how quick he is, how fast he can accelerate, how elusive he is as a runner. Uh, he's his decision making, he processes a little slow. I believe the average time from snap to throw last season was around 3 seconds, which is a little higher than one would like typically. But he really doesn't put the ball in harm's way all that much. I think last year he only had a 1.1% turnover worthy play rate. Uh, he's just very dynamic all around, and he's a great leader. He's mature beyond his years. Just if you listen to any talk he has with media, uh, see how selfless he is. He donates his NIL earnings from his merchandise back to the team. So he really is a team first guy. And I think something that teams look for in a quarterback. And yeah, I think that he probably is going to go to the draft in 2026. That will make 2026 a very interesting kind of transition year for the Sun Devils because a lot of players are seniors and will either graduate or go pro. So we'll see what happens there. And as for Baylor, I think Sawyer Robertson is shaping up to be a legitimate NFL prospect in his own right. We talked about his frame, his intelligence. He has a sufficient arm. He's more athletic than he gets credit for, a lot like Sam. And this is going to be a very interesting battle between two high level quarterbacks, probably the two best quarterbacks in the Big 12, if you ask me personally.
Mm, I'm gonna give you two for one, Kevin. Actually three for one because I got a rap, but also I'm really interested. One thing you gave me that I want to throw back at you: give me an X factor for this ASU team on offense, on defense. Um, what does a win mean for ASU? What does a loss mean? And yeah, that's it.
All right, an X factor on offense. That's a good one. That's a good one. I might give you a two for one. I'm gonna say Raleek Brown and Shimon Mateer are my X factors on offense. I think Raleek Brown, I think all three running backs realistically could have a good game, but I think Raleek Brown's really the guy that could break the second and third level of the Baylor defense most consistently. I think he could really be the difference between ASU scoring 28 and 38.
Mm,
Uh, I think Shimon Mateer coming off that six reception game where he scored a 27-yard touchdown. I think that he's really the perfect match opposite Michael Trigg. I think that he really is the guy that's going to exploit the soft zones that Baylor runs because obviously Baylor does a lot of those simulated coverages and pressures. Uh, I think that he's really the guy that could exploit that and support Jordan Tyson the most. Uh, Defensively, that's tough. That's tough. I could go a number of ways. I think I'm going to go with Keyshawn Elliott, the linebacker. I think that he's probably going to be assigned Michael Trigg a lot because you just not everybody can cover a guy like that. Like DBs are too small for him. Obviously, you're not putting an edge rusher on him. That's just insanity. I think Elliott's probably going to be assigned to him a lot when they do man schemes. I think that he's going to probably be the most vital player when it comes to keeping Baylor in front of the sticks and stop his stalling drives. Uh, I think he's going to be as valuable in run stopping as in coverage. Uh, and I really think he's a high level player. I think that he's going to be a big difference maker one way or another. Uh, what was the other thing?
I
My
said, what
bad.
is? No, you're good. Like I said, I they teach us not to do that in journalism school, but you know. You gotta do what you gotta do. What does the ASU win mean in terms of trying to get back on track and kind of bouncing back from that loss to Mississippi State? And what does a loss do in terms of, you know, you'll be starting off 2-2, you starting out with a conference loss and kind of impacting, those goals of getting back to Arlington and getting back to get back into the playoffs.
I think a win goes a long way in a number of ways. Obviously, your Big 12 title defense is at the forefront of your mind. Uh, Oklahoma is the only team in the history of the Big 12 as constructed to win back-to-back conference titles, so that's easier said than done. I think also it'll go a long way in terms of recruiting
Mm.
for the next five teams they play are in the state of Texas. And Coach Dillingham's staff has made a big point of recruiting in Texas over the last couple of years. I believe 8 players from the 2026 class are from Texas, including Jake Fede, who's one of the top quarterbacks in the state. Uh, and I think that having an impressive showing in those backyards of Texas will catch recruits' attention. Absolutely. Uh, as for a loss, it's I can't lie. I think a loss automatically puts them as a long shot to repeat as champions to win the Big 12 crown this year to make the playoff because the difficult stretch only continues. And they're probably going to do without Xavier Alford and maybe some other players as well. You never know who's going to get hurt in this game this weekend. But you have a quick turnaround. You play TCU at home next Friday, and that's going to be a very tough team as well. TCU is very similar to Baylor, I feel like, in terms of having a very, very potent, high octane offense and a defense that has a few question marks around them. Uh, and then you have a bye week where hopefully you can get some guys back, but then you travel to Utah. Utah might be the toughest road environment to play at in the entire Big 12, maybe in the entire country. They have an insanely built up trench group, both on offense and defense. Obviously, they have two high level tackle prospects. They have maybe a top five run game in all of college football, and they have an upgraded quarterback now. That was one of the big problems they had the last 2 years was the uncertainty at the QB position. But Devin Dampier has maybe been the second best quarterback in the Big 12 so far this season outside of Sawyer Robertson. So that's going to be a challenge as well. And then they cap off that stretch by playing Texas Tech at home. And Texas Tech, as we all know, they're probably either the best or second best team in the conference on paper. Obviously, paper doesn't translate to wins, but they've looked the part so far this season, even though they haven't played great competition yet. They're going to get tested against Utah this Saturday. And Arizona State really needs a win this Saturday to set the tone and to reestablish themselves as the team that's being chased, not the team that's doing the chasing.
Mm. The table is set. The West Coast guys coming into Texas. They already taking some recruits. They coming into Texas to bounce back, to set the stage. And honestly, two teams with aspirations of getting to Arlington will face off. You heard what my man Kevin said. Kevin, I really appreciate you, brother. Check out Kevin on Twitter/X, KHicks_21. You can read his work over at Arizona State on SI. Kevin, I really appreciate you, but we're going to do this again soon.
Absolutely. I appreciate you.